Hola chicos. So in this video, I wanted to review the uses of the subjunctive. Now, I'm not going to go over the conjugations of them. If you want to do that, you can go to 2 weeks ago when I went over those. I'm just going to talk about the uses, and I'm going to kind of breeze through these, just give you a little refresher, and that's all you need. Good. If you need a little bit more details, then go to last week's videos, and you can hear a little bit more about each of these. So I'm going to start off with the influence. Now, if you remember the acronym WEIRDO, this really talking about volition, influence, will. You might hear all those different words, but this is the W of will and wishes is where the weirdo, the W is. Also the R, which is your requests or recommendations. And so these are really probably the main use of the subjunctive and noun clauses. So what always this consists of is a potential subjunctive trigger in the main clause. In this example here, you can see I've got yo quiero. Now, this is querer, which is I want, which is, that qualifies as a verb of influence, verb of will or influence or wishes. I want something to happen. What do I want? I want you to go to the movies with me. So if this is a verb of influence in the main clause, that means in this main clause, if we have a verb of influence and in the second, the subordinate clause, we have a different subject, that means we are going to use a subjunctive when we conjugate in that clause. So verb of influence with a change in subject will give you subjunctive in that subordinate clause. Now, it is really useful. I mean, that is nice to know. You can kind of interpret whether a verb is a verb of influence or not. But if you have, if you kind of just get familiar with the vocab a little bit, that also makes things easier. So you can see some of these expressions. We went over them in the other video too. It's a little bit different, but the verbs, these are pretty common. So these are probably, there's a lot of crossover with these ones. But I would take some time, kind of maybe pause the video, look at these verbs, and study them a bit, like as if you were taking a vocab quiz on it. Here are some examples. Again, I'll do this one real quick. Now here we've got Martín quiere. There's a verb of influence, and he wants nosotros to record. He wants us to. So we've got Martín as the subject of the first main clause, and nosotros is the clause of the subject of the second clause. That's why we get the subjunctive conjugation. But a verb of influence, change in subject, equals subjunctive. El abogado is our subject of this first main clause here, which goes with the verb recomienda, which obviously is a recommendation. So it's another verb of influence. And that I read, so a change in subject, lea, subjunctive. A lot of these impersonal expressions, I'm not really going to get into impersonal expressions today, but you can see the impersonal expressions are the ones without really a subject, a specific subject. Es necesario, es importante, es urgente. Those phrases are often going to be subjunctive. That's actually the I of weirdo. The I is the impersonal expression. So most impersonal expressions are subjunctive triggers. Not always, but usually you can take an impersonal expression and trace it back to one of the three main uses. In this case, es necesario, I would trace that to verb of influence. Okay, moving on. So going along with verbs of influence, I keep talking about having a change in subject. If you don't have a change in subject, remember, you're going to use the infinitive instead. So here, yo quiero, we've got a verb of influence, and our main clause, in fact, it's our only clause because the second part right here, the subject of ir is yo. So I'm the one that's wanting that I go. If I'm the one that's wanting to go, I don't conjugate ir, I just leave it in the infinitive form. But if I wanted you to go, we would have a change in subject, and then you would conjugate ir in the to form, vayas. Over here, I prefer that you go, prefiero que vayas. Now, if I were preferring that I go, this would be the infinitive, prefiero ir. That means there's no change in subject, but since there is, we use a subjunctive here. All right, second use we went over last week was a verb of emotion. Again, emotion is not a great word for it, but kind of just a umbrella term for all these types of expressions. You know, I like to think of them as reactions as well as emotions. They're not always literal happy, sad, you know, those types of emotions. You know, in this case, I hope. I guess it's a verb of emotion, but that's how it is classified. So espero, I hope. Again, we still need that same situation here where we have to have a different subject in the subordinate clause. Espero que tenga. Es una lástima que no puedas. We have that change. So we have, in this case, yo is our subject here in the main clause, and then la película is the subject of the subordinate clause here. Impersonal expression again. So not really a specific subject. And then tú is the subject of the second clause. So verbs of motion, again, show you some examples. So here we've got a lot of verbs. Now these are just kind of useful, even though if you just recognize it as being a, you know, an actual emotion, just pretty much know it's going to be subjunctive. It's still good to look at the vocab though, and as like I said, study the vocab, know it, you know, be familiar with it. Some of the verbs you may not seen, you know, you may not have seen them very often, but they are used. All these verbs here, I'd say, you know, I see fairly often. So, you know, again, pause the video if you need to take a moment to look at the vocab here. Okay. Same deal, infinitive. If you don't have a change of subject, you're going to want to use the infinitive instead of the conjugation. Okay, moving on. Third use, final use we're going to talk about today, doubt or denial. I also like to throw in with this is probability, you know, because those are also going to be with the subjunctive. So doubt, denial, probability. This is the D of weirdo. So whenever, this one's a little bit weird because again, I think the verbs, actually let's go ahead and skip to the next slide. Just show you the, whenever you have these verbs, if you look at what they mean, they're fairly obvious that there's doubt in them. You know, it literally means to doubt, do that, the first one in there, and they got to deny. So we have doubt and denial in the first two examples of each column. To be evident, to believe, or not to believe, not to be evident, sorry. To be certain. These are way more explicit in what they mean. So I think getting across doubt or denial is pretty obvious. It's just one thing that's weird about it is the nuance between, is that whenever you have doubt, you know, like dudar, you've got doubt in the main clause, that means you're going to use subjunctive in your subordinate clause. However, if you are to put a no in front of that, what you're essentially doing is negating the doubt, and now you're in your subordinate clause, you are going to use the indicative in it. So a little bit weird, something you got to remember. In the video from last week, you hopefully remember when I put like I did some really weird math problems. I put no plus doubt equals indicative, indicativo, and then just plain old doubt would be subjunctive. But if I did no plus what we call grammatical certainty, I don't know what we call it, I call it that, no plus certainty is going to be subjunctive. And I can actually show you some of those examples on this list here. And notice also right here we've got a lot of different, we got lots of impersonal expressions right here, 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 and here, and here, and here, here, here. Lots of impersonal expressions. As I said, these are used a lot. Impersonal expressions are almost always going to be subjunctive, but I'm actually going to show you some examples where they're not going to be in the subjunctive. You notice over here, the impersonal expression is given with no in front of it. No es evidente. This is one of our examples of using, we have certainty here, es evidente, but with a no in front of it. So no plus that certainty, es evidente, means subjunctive. So that's why this one is in the subjunctive list. Es cierto, there's certainty, but no in front of it. Now we've got doubt, we use a subjunctive. Es verdad, certainty, but no in front of it. Now we've got subjunctive because now there's doubt. So whenever you get rid of the doubt with a no, you make it indicative, like dudar. No dudo, I don't doubt it. So now there's certainty. So we use the indicative. But if I just say dudo, I don't have a no in front of it, then we use the subjunctive with it. Also, talk about creer. Well, this one's a real common one. Some people say opinions, use opinions, use a subjunctive with opinions. I don't like to say that because of this verb, which is very common. If I want to say that I think something, I believe something, that is going to be, creo que is not a subjunctive trigger. It's going to be the indicative that fills the blank here. If I think that, you know, tigers are pretty, creo que los tigres, I'm going to use, in this case, I think it, son. I'm going to use son. If, somebody disagrees with me and they say, no creo, I don't think that they are pretty. No creo que los tigres sean. In that case, we'll use the subjunctive because it's just simply no creo. Again, these are opinions. It's not something that's obviously certain. It's just expressing an opinion. When you can see with a no in front of it, it's still just as much of an opinion as it is without the no. So I don't like to say that opinions are subjunctive, even though you might hear that sometimes. But creer is going to be subjunctive. If there's a no in front of it, without the no, it'll be indicative. So as I said, just want to do a quick review. If this was enough for you, good, you can move on, do some of the work online. If you think that you need a little refresher, go to last week and see if you can fill in the gaps.